Here I have our character ready, already inked and colored. I'm recording this video the day after I finished coloring, so now I can look at the work with fresh eyes and possibly spot an imperfection or something I would like to change. If that's the case for you, there's still time to use the correction tools we mentioned before, Transform tool and Liquify tool, to make small adjustments. But from now on, it won't be as easy. Let's see why. As we saw earlier, Clip Studio allows us to group layers so that if we select the entire group, any change we make will affect all the layers in the group. Indeed, if I apply the Transform tool to the group, I can modify the size and proportions of all the layers in the group. However, if we try to use the Liquify tool, we'll see that it doesn't work correctly. The color layer or layers will be affected, but the vector layer with our line art won't change. The program itself will inform us that this happens because it is a vector layer, and therefore if we want to use the Liquify tool on it, we must first rasterize it. To rasterize it, just right-click on it and choose Rasterize. Now we can use the Liquify tool also affecting the inking layer. However, this comes at a cost. Rasterizing a vector layer means that all the information stored as vectors is lost and turned into a pixel layer. Apparently there is no difference, but by doing so we lose all the properties of vector strokes. We will no longer be able to manipulate them, widen them, or shrink them. For this reason, I think it is better to use correction tools in earlier stages, but in the worst case, the best you can do if you need last-minute corrections is to duplicate the vector layer before rasterizing it to have a backup copy and proceed with the changes. Honestly, at this point in the process, you shouldn't need to make many changes to the vector layer. So don't worry too much if you're forced to work with rasterized inking from now on. Just be aware of what the rasterizing process entails so that you can plan your creative process accordingly. When we're ready, we can create a new raster layer. In this case, since we're going to paint, we can't create a vector layer. We can rename this layer to whatever we want. And we're going to color on top of our layer with the flat colors. When it comes to shading, I recommend not using black or gray, but choosing a color that's a little warmer, like a dark maroon or a dark crimson. Depending on the ambient light, we want to use cool colors, like purple or bluish tones, especially if we want to draw our character in a nocturnal or mysterious environment. This time, I will choose one of these dark reddish tones that I usually use, and I will make sure I am on the correct layer. I have also displayed my lighting reference in this small Pure Ref window, so you can check how I apply the layers of light and dark to my character. To draw the shadows, I use the same pen tool that we have used all this time, our old friend, the pen tool. With this tool, I draw a line that divides the illuminated planes from the dark planes. In real life, this does not usually happen like this, as the transition between light and darkness is usually gradual, but in a comic, manga, or cel shading drawing style, working like this saves a lot of time and adds expressiveness to the characters. As you can see, I try to follow the lighting reference as best as I can. To do so, I use the same technique that we used during the sketching process. For example, to know where I have to draw the line on the face, I notice that in the reference, the line starts to go down diagonally from the central area of the ear, roughly to the corner of the mouth, so I try to replicate the same effect in my character. Next, I continue with the chin, and then I define the area of the neck. Our reference doesn't have a cap, so I'm going to have to improvise, but following roughly the same principles, if the light falls from above to the right, I figure that the line dividing lights and shadows should be more or less here. Well, this is a first approach that we can refine later, but to get a better perception of how our character is shaping up, we can now use the Fill tool, the paint bucket, to paint all the areas to the left of this line we just drew. If you have the problem that I had right now here, you see when I'm trying to paint this area, it's okay. Like when I'm trying to paint this area, this happens. The paint doesn't recognize this line because the tolerance value here is too high. If I reduce it to 11, let's try, then it works. Can you see tolerance 22? Doesn't work. Tolerance 11, it works. If you're wondering why I use always 11, 22, 33, it's just because then I can type the same key twice. You know, I press 1, 1, 2, 2, so I don't have to move my fingers. It's just a matter of speed. Then I will add some new shades here. And for now, we have it. Now we have marked the main dark areas of our character, but this color doesn't look very realistic. To appreciate how the shaded areas will look on our character in the final result, we need to change the blending mode of the layer. This may sound a bit technical, but actually all we have to do is open this drop-down menu here on the Layers panel and choose the Multiply option. Again, it's a bit complex to explain, but basically the multiply mode means that only the information related to dark pixels passes through to the lower layer, making the lighter pixels transparent. The result is that, as you can see, the colors we apply filter through to the lower layers, darkening them. This is just what we wanted. Usually I like strong shades like this, but if you think it's too much for you and you prefer lighter shades, you can adjust this very quickly by moving the opacity slider as we've done before. You see, you can get a softer shading or a harder one. Okay, I'll go for something like this. That's also why I like using colors instead of black for this kind of shading. So this color filters through this layer and gives some warmth and some uniformity to all the colors below. You see, when this red applies to this brown, but also to this blue, I think it creates some coherency and some warmth that makes the drawing more interesting. If I change this to pure black, like this, it's not bad. I like it too, but I think it looks less realistic, more like a cartoon. It's not realism what we're looking for, but the way that shades work, the way that shadows work in the real world, I think is closer to this than this. Anyway, of course, you can try to experiment with different tones. Remember that by pressing Ctrl U, you can change the colors very quickly. So you can try, you can have some fun with this, and then you can decide by yourself. For example, I think that this blue shade looks really cool too, kind of reflecting the light of the sea, don't you think? So yeah, sometimes just playing with these sliders can give you nice surprises. Anyway, this is just the first approach to our shading process. We have blocked the main areas, and honestly, I think it looks quite good already, but there's still some work to be done. But remember that in this phase, sometimes less is more. If you want to go for a cartoonish cel shading style, it is better to not overshade or to not draw shades that are too complicated, too precise, because otherwise if you do this, your drawing will read too complex, too realistic. Personally, I prefer more expressive ways of shading, so I focus on the main areas, the main shapes, and maybe I add a few details, but I try to not be too precise, too realistic with the shading. So when you see me now doing my shading, if you think that I'm doing something that doesn't really match our reference, Probably it's intentional. It's because I want my drawing to be more simple, more expressive, as opposed to more realistic. To finish our drawing, the first thing that you can do, especially if you have been changing the hue, changing the color of your shade, is press Alt click here, so you get your color of shade, and then you press Alt click to get it back, just so you are using the same color all the time. Then I will use the most simple tools to finish this, basically the pen tool, the eraser tool, the paint bucket tool, and the lasso tool. Just with a slightly bigger size of the pen tool, I will go around these areas that were not completely painted, just to make it look a little bit nicer. As you can see in the reference, this shade goes diagonally here. I'm not following that. Can you see? If I wanted to follow this, I would have to do something like this. And then to create a bigger shade for the nose that would go along this line. Here I'm using Shift to make a perfect straight line. And then this nose would project some shadow to this side. Something like this. Now I fill with the fill tool. And this is the result. Okay. I think it's good. I think it looks good. But honestly, I prefer it like this. Okay, with less shades. I think this way we can focus only on the main ones, and we kind of telling the viewer that we don't care about realism. You have to make a decision. Otherwise, you can be kind of in the middle, and your drawing can be seen as incomplete, kind of half realistic, half cartoonish. It's hard to explain, but like I said before, sometimes less is more, especially if you want to go for a style like this. I will add some shades here because I think the eyes are important. Let's see if this works. Yeah, looks good to me. So I'm using the pen here. And let's add some shades here on the hair. As you can see, I'm using one of these random lines that I used before as a limit for the lighted areas and the dark ones. It's a little bit random, of course, it's not very precise, but again, I'm more focused on expression than in realism. As you can see here, I'm having the same problem. These two colors, this line and this black, are too similar. So in order to differentiate them, I need to reduce, to lower the tolerance value. I will use 5, for example, and now it works. This value thing, this tolerance, is something you need to be adjusting constantly. I will add some shade here and also here. Maybe this projects some shadow down there, something like that. Did you see? I didn't close the gap here, but because I have a closed gap value quite high, the software is helping me. It's saying, okay, I know that you didn't close this, but probably that's what you meant, so I will close it for you. Okay. So that's why using the close gap function sometimes is helpful, sometimes it's not, but it's very easy to adjust. Okay, so I will follow these lines. I will add some random shade here. Another one here. Okay, it's looking good, I think. And now I will add some shades to this mustache, to the lower half of it. Maybe something like this. Pen tool, fill tool, eraser tool. That's all I'm doing. Rotating. Let's add another shape here. This triangle shape can be nice, simple. And let's add some shade under the mustache, maybe. You see, now what happened here is that this close gap function became a problem, because now the software is trying to help me taking these small gaps as a closed area. So, well, I can just click 3 times or 4, or I can just reduce the close gap value, so now it works. So as you can see, there's no ideal value. You need to keep adjusting it according to what you are doing. Let me try to add another shade here. Let's see how it looks. Probably I won't like it, but let me try. Okay, I don't like it that much, but this will allow me to introduce how to use the lasso tool for shading, which is very, very convenient. For example, in this area, it's okay, but I can create a shape using the lasso tool and then Control X to delete, to cut that part. And I think it looks better, but you know, still seeing this line here seems too thin, too accurate for my style. So I don't want that. I want it to look more simple. So I will delete it. Okay, I think now it's better. If you want to add more details, like I did right now, use the lasso tool. It's very useful. For example, I can add some surface here that it's more lightened, or another one here. Can you see? Very easily you can add these shapes that can help you to make your character more interesting. Or another triangle there. Yeah, looks good. Let's add another one here. No, I don't like that one. But when I zoom in, I realize that this could be better, so I will fix it. And that's all, I think. This is our character. Now he's shaded. Again, once you've finished, you may want to try to play with these sliders. Reduce the luminosity. Maybe I will reduce it a little bit. Maybe this was too red for this character. I think maybe this is better. Yeah, a little bit of saturation. And now let's play with the opacity. Yeah, I think this is good. At this point, we could well consider our project finished. We have a head with a solid and coherent structure, with correct proportions, clean and expressive inking, a consistent color palette, and simple but effective shading. Personally, I am quite satisfied with the project, and I think that this final result looks a lot like the idea I had in mind. I hope you are also satisfied with your character, but remember that this has been a learning exercise and that as you practice, you will achieve better results. However, before leaving this project and moving on to the next phase of the course, I'm going to use this head to talk about two shading techniques that might be useful to you: inverted shading and flat black shading. We will discuss these two complementary shading methods in the next lesson. Take the time you need to apply these basic shading techniques to your character. Remember to work on a separate layer in multiply mode and adjust the opacity slider to achieve the desired results. I recommend starting with simple shadows, shading large areas of the character. In my opinion, shading characters in overly complex ways offers diminishing returns, especially if you use an expressive and simple style like mine. Remember that even in shading, sometimes less is more.